So, this AEW and Impact Wrestling working relationship, talent trading, whatever you want to call it, has got a lot of people talking about potentially what matches or matchups could we see between wrestlers from AEW and between Impact Wrestling. And Sami Callihan and Jon Moxley are two names that have come up quite often. I mean, myself, I've pitched this a few times here on the channel, certainly on social media. A lot of people are interested in it. Here in the comments on WrestleNews 365, I've heard a lot of you say that you want to see Jon Moxley and Sami Callihan face off or team up. Of course, they've got history from their time on the independent scene as part of in CZW, as part of the Switchblade conspiracy with Jon Moxley and Sami Callihan. So what is fascinating is potentially could we see these two guys reunite in the future as part of this working relationship. Wow, what is interesting is that a report has come out that said that Sami Callihan invited the former AEW World Champion and current AEW wrestler Jon Moxley to join Impact Wrestling after Moxley departed WWE last year in 2019. Now, of course, AEW and Impact Wrestling, their working relationship, partnership, whatever you want to call it, kicked off this week when the new AEW World Champion Kenny Omega and Impact Wrestling Executive Vice President Don Callis were interviewed as part of the main event segment on Impact Wrestling on Access TV, with Josh Matthews conducting this interview on the tour bus of Kenny Omega and Don Callis. However, the former AEW champion, current AEW champion, Kenny Omega, this was his first appearance on Impact Wrestling, of course, but another former world champion could have been possibly never All Elite. He could have joined Impact Wrestling because, according to Cassidy Haynes of Bodyslam.net, Sami Callihan previously attempted to court, the words they're using, court Jon Moxley into Impact Wrestling following his departure from WWE in 2019. Of course, we know now that it wasn't successful, as Jon Moxley debuted in AEW after only 1 month after departing WWE. He debuted in AEW in May of 2019 at the Double or Nothing pay-per-view. Since then, he's pretty much been undefeated, apart from last week where he lost the AEW World Championship to Kenny Omega. That was his first singles defeat in AEW. He's a former AEW World Champion, in addition to, of course, being a former WWE World Heavyweight Champion too. Now, why did Sami Callihan go after Jon Moxley? What chance would he get of tempting Jon Moxley to go to Impact Wrestling? What's their history? Well, of course, Jon Moxley and Sami Callihan were previously part of a group called the Switchblade Conspiracy on the independent scene, specifically in CZW. Now, since this whole working relationship deal and possibility has opened up between Impact Wrestling and AEW, in addition to fans on social media, the talent in both AEW and Impact Wrestling has been buzzing about the possibility and potential of a talent trade between both companies, which could lead to some very interesting and never thought possible matchups between AEW wrestlers and stars from Impact Wrestling. Specifically, Sami Callihan, who has taken to Twitter on several occasions. Now, the first time he took to Twitter, Sami Callihan just posted a GIF of a switchblade, which led people to obviously make the link between Sami Callihan, Switchblade Conspiracy. Oh my God, he's calling out Jon Moxley. He wants a reunion with Jon Moxley. Well, Sami Callihan put any doubt to rest that he was calling out Jon Moxley, because he then posted the tweet that said, quote, "After what happened last night, someone towel at Jon Moxley. We have some unfinished business. At Impact Wrestling, at AEW, hashtag Impact on Access TV." Once again, he posted a GIF of a switchblade. So Sami Callihan seems all in, pun intended, for a Switchblade Conspiracy reunion, whether that's in AEW or Impact Wrestling. So this is very interesting. Now, when you say this now, I can already kind of maybe hear people or see people rolling their eyes. I can already hear the people in the comments saying Jon Moxley would never go to Impact Wrestling, and it's a non-story that Sami Callihan asked Jon Moxley or tried to bring him into Impact Wrestling back in 2019. And I disagree. I disagree with that. Now, obviously, very unlikely right now Jon Moxley would ever sign a contract with Impact Wrestling. He's with AEW and he does very, very well. We can't rule out, of course, an appearance by Jon Moxley in Impact now that this potential AEW and Impact Wrestling working relationship exists. But to say that Jon Moxley would have never been interested in going to Impact Wrestling post-WWE, I just don't think is true. Now, why do I say that? Well, of course, Jon Moxley has said in several interviews that he's done since leaving WWE, specifically the one with Chris Jericho I'm thinking about here. This was his first major interview after leaving WWE. It was on Talk Is Jericho. He openly said to Jericho, "Look, I was leaving WWE regardless of any existence of AEW. AEW. If AEW didn't exist, if Tony Khan hadn't decided to found this new promotion, I was leaving WWE regardless, and I was just going to work on the indies. All he wanted to do at that period of time, after being miserable in WWE for an extended period, all he wanted to do was work, have fun, and fall in love with pro wrestling again. He was just going to go and work on the indies, probably go to Japan. I think Japan was probably his first option. He wanted to go to New Japan. But if AEW didn't exist, he was going to go to New Japan, and then he was going to work select indie shows. He wanted to have fun. He wanted to fall in love with the industry. He openly said, just because I was the WWE World Heavyweight Champion, just because I was one of the members of the Shield, just because I was a relatively big star in WWE, a major name, he just wanted to find the passion again. He wasn't too big to work on the indies. He wasn't too big to go back to what he did before. And of course, the independent scene, I was just about to say it's changed. It has, but it's changed again in 2020 due to the pandemic. But the independent scene has changed. And it was evident of that with Cody Rhodes when he left WWE. And it's very evident when things go back to normal that the independent scene has changed. Previously, as a pro wrestler, if you just worked the indie scene, you could maybe just get by when it comes to finances and having a high quality standard of life. Nowadays, that's different. You can make a very good living if you're the right name or a big enough talent on the independent scene. If you're a Jon Moxley, maybe not for your average Joe, if it were, as you were, but someone like Jon Moxley coming out of WWE, he doesn't need to go to a major promotion. He could just do select indie dates, and he could do very, very well just doing those indie dates. And he said in that interview, he wasn't too big to work the indies. He even said, look, if I left WWE and the independent scene didn't exist, he would reseed them himself just to work and have fun once again on the independent scene. So if you can indulge me here, if we can go into this hypothetical scenario, if AEW wasn't around, could we have seen Jon Moxley make an appearance in Impact Wrestling? I absolutely do. I absolutely think it would have been a possibility. I really do. Would this have been a full-time exclusive deal? Absolutely not. Absolutely, it wouldn't have been a case that Jon Moxley leaves WWE to go to Impact and then becomes a full-fledged member of the Impact roster and only appears on Impact Wrestling. It just wouldn't have happened. But a one-off match, a one-off program against someone like Sami Callihan, a reunion with Sami Callihan, I could have absolutely seen Jon Moxley doing that. I could have absolutely seen Jon Moxley eventually going to Impact Wrestling. If AEW had not existed at the time, I could have absolutely seen him doing that. And I think the reason why people might be so quick to say, it would have never happened, it would have been impossible, there is this perception, I think, right now when it comes to Impact, maybe before the AEW crossover, but there certainly has been this perception of Impact for the last couple of years, coming out of the time on Spike TV and then all of the chaos with Billy Corgan and Dixie Carter and then Destination America, Pop TV, the ratings falling down and the company going out of business several times and not being able to pay talent and then winding up orders, going to court, etc. There is this perception of Impact as this much smaller company with the Impact Zone as it currently is in Nashville empty and nobody in there. In reality, outside of the pandemic, if you've been a regular viewer of Impact for the last sort of 3 years or so, Impact does run smaller TV tapings with a smaller crowd and in a more cramped environment. But yes, they do have loyal fans, and they do have fans that attend and pay to go watch these TV tapings or pay to go watch these pay-per-views that they do. And if you watch these events, they kind of do them in these quite unique settings now where it is a small audience, but it's a very small room. It's a cramped room. The audience is rowdy. They're loud. It's a small audience, but it's a packed audience. And I think most professional wrestlers would say, do you want to compete inside of an arena with 10,000 people, or do you want to be in a cramped, small, I can't even call it an arena, but venue with 250, 300 people that are loud and the noise is just packed in there, it doesn't go up and the atmosphere is great and they give everything to the pro wrestler? Or do you want to be at a WWE TV taping that's got 10,000 people but they're making no noise and they're sitting on their hands? I think most pro wrestlers would probably want to be in the smaller environment with the crowd with the most energy because that's what they thrive off. And I'm hesitant to say it's got an ECW kind of vibe, but what I mean by that is those small packed-in shows, I could have absolutely have seen Jon Moxley wanting to do that as a one-off. Why wouldn't he? But of course, we know that it didn't happen because AEW exists. We live in reality, AEW exists, and it never happened. So the idea that, and the argument that, Jon Moxley would have never have gone to Impact Wrestling, I disagree. I think Jon Moxley falls into that same category of Chris Jericho and Kenny Omega that actually were probably quite close to going to Impact Wrestling. And the reason they didn't was because of the emergence of AEW. But Chris Jericho would have worked in New Japan, Kenny Omega was working in New Japan, and Jon Moxley would have gone to New Japan. That was his number one goal. But to say all three of them wouldn't have had an interest in working even for a one-off appearance with Impact Wrestling, it's just not true. You've got Kenny Omega and Chris Jericho. They've got the connections to Don Callis. Don Callis has stated several times it was close, and if it wasn't for AEW, they would have made at least one appearance. Now, Kenny Omega since has made that appearance. I'm not ruling out a Chris Jericho one, given his connections to Don Callis and his desire to get people talking in the industry. You know Chris Jericho is desperate to appear on Impact because he wants to shake things up once again and do things that are different, especially at this stage in his career. And more importantly, when it comes to Jericho, Omega, and Don Callis and Jon Moxley, Anthem has money. Anthem does have money. There is also, I mentioned about the perception of Impact Wrestling, there is this perception that Impact, after all the money troubles they had all those years ago, that they're not well backed or they don't have a ton of money to spend because they do the smaller shows and they are a smaller company in comparison to WWE and AEW, and they don't have WWE or AEW money, I must say. But they are owned by a company in Anthem that also owns the TV network, and they are pretty well backed. They are very well funded. And we've seen on the occasion when Anthem wants to spend money, when Anthem wants to invest in Impact Wrestling, they do. The Good Brothers signing this year for Impact Wrestling is the perfect example of that. It's a great example of that. You can't tell me the Good Brothers don't come cheap. That would have been an expensive contract. They were in demand. Arguably, they were two of the biggest names to be released by WWE earlier this year. New Japan is and was interested, and the Good Brothers are going to go back to New Japan when they're ready. It's in their Impact contract that they're allowed to. I'm sure AEW were interested. I think the issue there might have been some residual heat over the Good Brothers not signing with AEW back in 2019 and re-signing with WWE. Nevertheless, Impact had to pay a pretty penny when it comes to signing Doc Gallows and Kyle Anderson. So it goes to show, look, if Impact wants to sign you and they think it's a worthwhile investment, if Impact wants you, they'll make you a good offer. And by all accounts, Kyle Anderson, Doc Gallows, they're very happy with their contracts in Impact Wrestling, especially the finances and the ability to do all the outside projects. So let's not kid ourselves and say, well, Anthem would never be able to, or Impact would have never been able to afford Jon Moxley. They absolutely could have. For a couple of appearances and the ability for Moxley to do all of these outside projects, why not? Jon Moxley wouldn't have been exclusive. It might have just been one match. It would have been good money, and Impact and Anthem would have looked at it going, look, it would have been a massive star like Jon Moxley. It will help our ratings on Access TV, and in terms of the pay-per-view, it will sell out the building, and we might do a good number on pay-per-view for us. So I think the narrative of, well, because I've seen some reactions to this story of them going, wow, Sami Callihan asked, but he was never going to go to Impact. Well, that's maybe because AEW was around by that point. But let's not say that if AEW wasn't around, it wouldn't have been an option, because I think it would have been. And right now, given the current landscape of this Impact and AEW crossover working relationship, can it absolutely happen in the future? Yes. Yes, it can. I think, like many people, this AEW and Impact relationship has really opened things up. Is it a one-off? Is it intertwined? Is it not intertwined? We're hearing so many things. Personally now, after seeing Impact this week, after seeing AEW this week, to me, especially the Impact episode, it feels like more than a one-off. And the reason why I think that, look at the Rich Swann tease on Impact. Why would you do that tease without paying it off? You had Rich Swann walking down the hallway. He's going to leave the building. There's a guy there. So sorry, you can't go into the parking lot. It's been blocked off by the world champion. Rich Swann goes, I'll tell Moose he's not the real world champion. He goes, no, not Moose. Kenny Omega, the AEW world champion. He's blocked it off. His bus is out there. Rich Swann, incredibly disrespected by the whole thing, is angry. He kicks stuff and he leaves. Why would you do that tease of Kenny Omega calling himself the real world champion? Why would you film that scene with Rich Swann if you didn't want to pay it off? Some people might say, oh, it's just a tease, it's just a red herring. I don't think you would. In addition, you had Tony Khan, Tony Schiavone on Impact. They can easily post-produce and add some more stuff in if it gets buzz, which it has been doing. And, you got Kenny Omega and Don Callis on AEW this week. If anything, they said less than they said on Impact. They didn't do their big announcement. That could still happen in Impact Wrestling, which again says to me it's more than a one-off. We also know the Good Brothers are coming to AEW soon. Tony Khan mentioned it on Impact on Tuesday. I'm scouting some tag teams. It looks like the Good Brothers, the Impact World Tag Team Champions, are going to face the Young Bucks, the AEW World Tag Team Champions, at some point in AEW. It's more than a one-off. It's more than a one-off. And the Young Bucks were being truthful in their interviews when they were talking about it. They're feeling it out. They're feeling out the relationship. They're seeing what could be. But the Bucks have spoken about wanting to face off against the Motor City Machine Guns. Why would they say that if it's just going to be a one-off? People are excited by this. Talent's excited by this. Fans are excited by this. There's been a ton of buzz, and there's potential to get a ton more buzz. I truly feel at this point they almost have to expand the relationship. When something's hot in pro wrestling, whether it's a superstar, a wrestler, an angle, a storyline, whatever, you go with it. How many times have we heard that? If something's working, change plans, you go with it. Whatever's working, just go with it. And this relationship is working. It's hot. It's got buzz. And people don't know where it's going. How often do we see these storylines or we see these angles in pro wrestling and we know exactly where the final destination is? And we know exactly every single twist and turn ahead of us. It's boring. It's predictable. I don't know where this relationship is going between Impact and AEW. I think the majority of people in AEW and Impact don't know where it's going. So why wouldn't you expand on it? If you've got this great reaction like you have, and if it is a mutually beneficial relationship, which it absolutely is, why wouldn't you expand on it? And quite frankly, going back to the Jon Moxley, Sami Callihan situation, you think if Jon Moxley goes to the AEW president, Tony Khan, look, I want to go to Impact, I want to face Sami Callihan, or I want Sami Callihan to face me here in AEW, you think he's going to be told no? He's one of the biggest stars that they've got, and Jon Moxley, quite frankly, given his name and his reputation and his history, he can do what he wants. He really can. A little known fact, in that AEW deal that he signed back in 2019, he had an out clause in his contract after 1 year. If he wasn't happy the way that he was getting booked or he was getting presented, he could null and void his contract after 1 year. Now, obviously, he hasn't since done that. Kind of makes you realise why he was probably the AEW World Champion. Make him happy. Nevertheless, they put that in Jon Moxley's contract because basically they're saying, look, you can do what you want. You can do what you want. If it's right for business, do what you want. And it's the same here. If Jon Moxley goes to Tony Khan and goes, you know what? I really want to work with Sami Callihan. Can we make that happen? They're going to do it. So is Moxley going to go to Impact for a one-off appearance? Who knows? If Kenny Omega's doing all of these appearances in Impact, maybe Jon Moxley goes there eventually to try and get his title back, or at least attack Kenny Omega, where Kenny Omega feels safe, you know? So I think going back to the Moxley-Callihan deal, if that match does happen, I think it will probably happen in AEW. I think Tony Khan would probably want that to happen in AEW. For Impact, the fact that it happens at all is a win-win. You know, I don't think they would probably have the match in Impact. I think AEW would want that to be on their turf. And even if it does, the fact that it's an Impact Wrestling wrestler in Sami Callihan appearing, that's good enough for Impact. The exposure is what they really benefit from here, in addition to talent, but mainly exposure. And also, you know, you have to look at the future when it comes to Jon Moxley right now. He needs something to do. He just lost the AEW World Championship. Now, is he going to win it back anytime soon? Probably not. AEW likes to have long world title reigns. I know there's only been 3 so far, Jericho, Moxley, and now Omega, but they like to have long title reigns. We're not going to get so many short switches when it comes to world championships. So is Moxley going to win the title back anytime soon? Probably not. His feud with Omega isn't over yet, obviously, considering the circumstances in which he lost the World Championship. Nevertheless, eventually he'll have the rematch and he probably won't win. So once he has that feud with Omega, once that finishes and he goes on to something else, he needs something to do. And considering, as I mentioned, this relationship, this storyline, this AEW Impact deal is hot and it is buzzing, strike while the iron's hot. Move into a feud or a reunion with Sami Callihan. Maybe try and bring in Sami Callihan as backup, right? Jon Moxley's outnumbered when it comes to Kenny Omega and Don Callis. Maybe, you know, Jon Moxley goes, you know what, I need some backup. I need to go and find my friend. He goes find Sami Callihan, and that turns into a rivalry. And then have the death match. Have the match that people want to see. I'm not massive on the whole death match and the blood and guts and all that kind of stuff, but I felt like the Jon Moxley, Kenny Omega probably took it a bit too far when they did it at Full Gear. But Jon Moxley, Sami Callihan could do something really special from that point of view. In pro wrestling, we love reality and we love stories that make sense. The Jon Moxley, Sami Callihan story makes sense, and there's reality there, there's history there. There is meat on the bone to get it into, as it were, when it comes to the story. So a death match, you know, thumbtacks, barbed wire, I'd want them to go all out. I think they could do something very unique and very crazy, and I think both parties would want it here. And so maybe Sami Callihan could get the match or reunion that he courted Jon Moxley for over a year ago. So we'll have to wait and see. But of course, as always, This is just one man's opinion. What are your thoughts on Sami Callihan trying to court Jon Moxley to come to Impact Wrestling back in 2019? And what do you think about a potential Sami Callihan versus Jon Moxley feud or match in the future? Is it possible? Is it not possible? What do you think? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I'll do my best to respond and reply to all of your comments. Really enjoy interacting with you guys, talking about Impact Wrestling, WWE, AEW, NXT, all that fun stuff in pro wrestling land. So make sure to get involved with the community below. If you have enjoyed this video, please do smash a like on the like button. It really does help us out here on YouTube. Go up the rankings and get into people's recommendation feeds if they haven't seen our videos previously. But most importantly, if you haven't already, please do subscribe to Wrestle News 365. You can do that by clicking the bottom right hand corner of the screen right now. Or if you wait a few seconds, there'll be a subscribe button at the end of this video along with another video for you to watch. Thank you very much for watching, listening, streaming, or have you come across this video today. And I'll speak to you again very, very soon.
Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.